Hello everyone, hope you all are keeping well. In continuation to the previous discussions of the chapter The Cold War Era, today we are going to continue our chapter furthermore. We are going to continue our discussion furthermore. We are going to discuss first about the arenas of Cold War. Now what is the meaning of arenas of Cold War? The entire world was an open area where the two superpowers, one was USA promoting the ideology of capitalism, while the other superpower was USSR, which was promoting the ideology of communism or socialism. They both had entered into rivalries and were helping out other small countries by backing them in proxy wars. Proxy war, as you all know, are those types of wars where the superpowers were not directly involved, but they were promoting other nations to fight with each other. For example, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Korean War, and the Congo conflict. So, these were certain issues where we see the confrontation between the superpowers. Moreover, because of the realization of nuclear weapons on both the ends, the superpowers found it very difficult to trust or to believe that they would be holding back their nuclear weapons or their anger against each other. Though they were facing resistance by institutions like NAM, that is Non-Aligned Movement, when it came into existence, and by other newly independent African countries also. But to ensure that any incident where nuclear weapons go on a devastating effect, whether it is a sabotage or whether that is an accident, to decide that was not certain. So to make it certain, these countries started imposing in the eras of 1960s agreements like the Limited Test Ban Treaty, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. So, there were several rounds of arms limitations talks between them, and they signed several more treaties to limit their arms and nuclear weapons. Now, let us continue the challenge to bipolarity. As I told you, NAM was a big challenge to this concept of bipolarity. NAM means non-aligned movement. Now, five leaders, including Yugoslavia's Joseph Broz Tito, India's Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Egypt's Gamal Abdel, Indonesia's Sukarno, and Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah, they had come together to form this association called Non-Aligned Movement, and the first summit of NAM was conducted in Belgrade in the year 1961. Now, what was the basic objective of NAM? The basic objective of NAM was cooperation among these five nations, and they were also trying to check the widening arenas of Cold War. That means the influence of the superpowers was increasing day by day, and the world was coming under the influence. So they tried to protect their countries from this widening arena of Cold War. Moreover, in this sphere of time, many African countries who had become newly decolonized had joined the United Nations. They were about 16 African members who had joined United Nations organizations, and these countries were in grave need of support, recognition, and to be granted respect in the world community. So, the first summit of NAM was conducted with a membership of 25 member states, and the 14th summit, which is the last entry in your CBSE books, is of 116 members. This summit was conducted in Havana and there were 15 observer countries present in the summit. Then the 18th summit of NAM was conducted in the year 2019 and there were 120 members and it was conducted in the city of Baku, which is in the country Azerbaijan. So in total there were 160 countries and international organizations present in the summit. Now, what was the motive behind the conduction of these summits or behind the organization of this entire association? Earlier, the motive was to provide support to the newly independent nations and cooperation amongst the member countries. So, it was basic or vital till the year 1960s. These were the basic objectives. But with the change of span in the decade of 70s, trade and commerce had become the top priority of NAM. And the very basic soul of NAM was to maintain neutrality. That means neither they were going to favor USA, neither they were going to support the ideology of communism or USSR. So, other than this organization wanted to maintain peace and stability in Asian and African countries or wheresoever the members were from. Now, after the forming of NAM, a new term came into being that is called or known as NEO, that is New International Economic Order. This was one of the declarations given by the UN in the United Nations Trade and Development Council in the year 1972. And a new term came into being which referred LDCs, that means least developed countries. So all the newly independent African countries, India and the countries of the third world were counted as least developed countries. So now the NAM started or the NEO started promoting the interest of these countries or the third world countries. What were the interests or what were their objectives? To gain self-sufficiency by using the natural resources present in these newly independent nations and to have access to the Western markets, so where these third world countries could sell out their products also. Other than this, to reduce the cost of technology that was being charged from them by the Western countries. Why? Because they had developed technology. Either we talk of USA, either we talk of USSR. Whatever assistance they gave in the name of technology, they charged quite a handsome lump sum from these countries. Now, other than this, a big argument was that the LTC should be provided a greater role with in international economic institutions, also in the United Nations and other spheres. So this was one of the other demand of the new international economic order. Now, when we are discussing all these points, we need to realize that what is the present relevance of NAM. So as I told you children, that earlier emphasis was on peace and stability, on support amongst the nations, cooperation amongst the nation, and secondary emphasis was on trade and commerce. But in present scenario, if NAM continues to put on emphasis on trade and commerce, cooperation amongst the third world countries on political issues, on economic issues and contexts, as well as the global issues for upgrading and betterment of their governments and people. Other than this, the most dire issues nowadays are terrorism, how to contain terrorism, and environmental issues which are creating a lot of trouble nowadays. One of the incident that took place in Beirut is one of the example. Then peace, which is an evergreen concept or issue in world politics. So now was relevant earlier and till date also, in present scenario also it is very much relevant. And what was the role of India in the Cold War era? India through NAM was able to maintain self-serving interests. Why? Because through the dais of NAM, it could manage to maintain its position of a buffer state. It was not supporting the military alliances, it was not supporting any of the financial alliances. So, it maintained its interest without coming under the influence of USA or USSR. Then India managed to somehow deal with both the superpowers. So neither they could take India or us for granted or bully India. So because of the dais of NAM, because of its association with African countries and with other countries, presently we are having more than 120 members in NAM. So it could maintain its respect, its sovereignty. Now, this is not only this much. Every coin has two faces. So, there was a lot of criticism also when India had joined this organization or association of NAM. The most important criticism is that India became unprincipled, or the entire institution of NAM was unprincipled. Why? Because they were trying to run away from the realities of that era. Other criticism, another important criticism is that United Nations and many of the countries claimed that India is inconsistent and its views are contradictory when it comes to the context of NAM. Why? Contradictory means a person is talking in two manners. Once he or she is supporting something, and in the meanwhile he is talking against the same concept. So United Nations and many countries believe that India did not have a clear perspective. NAM was just an excuse to avoid the international issues throughout that sphere. So this much only for this video. Rest we'll be discussing in the next part. Thank you and stay safe.